welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This is a segment we're going to do, and I'm going to call it Nutrition Shorts. There's been several topics that have come over through email or on social media that have been about specific things. Like sometimes it's protein and endurance. Sometimes it's asking questions about carbohydrate loading. Sometimes it's different questions. And in the past, we've done these nutrition shorts. It's usually just me. It's usually fairly short if I can make it that way. And it's just brief. And so my hope is that I'm going to start trying to pull some of these out of the direct messages that come through social media, as well as pull some of them out through email and just talk on little individual topics and maybe try to plug those in between our typical longer shows that we do. The intent has always been to take these and include them in the Q&A, but honestly, you guys send so many great Q&As that these usually end up getting dropped. And so we cover these, these bigger topics, and then these get missed, but they're still important. So the one that we're going to cover this week is on creatine, and specifically about using creatine in the backcountry. Creatine's a fairly popular supplement that's been around, and up until the last, call it like 10, 15 years, it's mostly been used in the context of bodybuilding and gym lifters and building big muscle, right? It's not really been talked about or even thought of in the endurance community, and definitely not in the backcountry community, whether that's backcountry hunting or ski touring or ultra running or anything like that. But this has grown in popularity, and one way that I've seen it grow is just in the number of questions that I get it in. So like in the last however many months, we've gotten questions that range from one guy getting ready to go on a sheep hunt who was curious about dropping his creatine regimen, his creatine supplementation regimen prior to the sheep hunt to lose weight and be lighter on that hunt. His concern, though, was that he would lose hydration because, give you a little bit of background on creatine, when you take creatine, it is notable that you get an increase in scale weight because you hold a lot of water. So creatine can draw water into the muscle cell, and it makes sense where someone would think, okay, well, it's kind of like the camel effect, right? If I'm holding more water, that naturally means I'm going to have a higher hydration status. This is an early hunt. I'll be sweating a lot. Seems like I don't want to lose the potential or theoretical benefits there. So, what's the case there? So we actually just did, or I wrote an article on this. So you can see the written version online in our journal. If you get interested, you can just click the link in the show notes. It'll take you there. You can read through this. But at the same time, I thought this would be a really good short to cover. And then I kind of thought about doing a YouTube. I was like, I'm just going to do a short because honestly, then it's not going to sit on my to-do list forever. And these are a lot easier to get out than editing videos. So, and this now uploads to YouTube as a podcast, which many of you listen to. So thank you for that. So I thought, let's cover it. And specifically, we're going to cover this in the context of basically 6 things. What is creatine? Should we care about it? Does it actually work? Is it dehydrating if we stop drinking it? Should I avoid it or take it in the mountains? Should I avoid it or take it in preparation in training for the mountains? In other words, should I take it while training in the months leading up to an event or a hunt or whatever? So these are the topics we're going to look at through today. What is creatine? So I essentially just gave you a good description of it, but I think the one thing that I left out in there was it's a naturally occurring compound that's found in muscle cells. I told you that it increases water in muscle cells, but I didn't tell you that it's naturally occurring. That's important for 2 reasons. Number one, you already have some natural stores inside of you. We call these endogenous or intrinsic or inside of, if you want to call it that. So that's important to remember that you already have some, and we're going to elaborate more on this here in a little bit. The second reason that it's important to remember that this is true of most mammals. So when you eat meat, if you are a meat eater, you are now consuming some as well, which is getting that intake higher. And that's important to think about because when you talk about supplements, what we always say is Supplements are warranted, supplements are justified if you can't get enough of something from a natural food, and or you don't have anything in your daily diet that has a specific nutrient in it. So if you don't eat any meat and you take creatine, you would be potentially getting something that you're not getting through your diet. That would be a potential reason to really consider this. So I think that that's important to remember in the definition of this, that it's naturally occurring. You already have some stored in you. And if you're a meat eater, you're getting some from outside sources as well. So, should we care? Why or why not? Well, I think you should care, or at least explore the topic if all of these reported benefits are true, right? I mean, if there is something out there that exists that's harmless, relatively inexpensive, and easy to take, which creatine is all of those things, that suggest that you're going to get value from increased muscle size, increased performance for short, high intensity burst of energy or training, and evaluating whether or not it actually increases water, if it has a dehydrating effect. It's also been some reports of it improving brain function. So you've got all of these potential reports out there. So should we care? Should we explore it? You should absolutely explore it. If there's something out there, like I said, that may be giving you all those benefits, it's definitely worth looking into. Are these reports true? And if so, how do I get it? How do I go about getting it? So I think that it's important to look at that. So does it actually work? That's the third lens that you've got to view this through, because these all, so far you're like, I mean, so far you probably have already jumped on Amazon and bought 5 bottles to try, but you've got to evaluate it through the lens of, does it actually do what it says it does? The answer to that is yes, kind of, but also maybe not. So here's some things that you've got to consider when trying to evaluate, is it going to work? And this is key, for me. So here's some categories to think about and listen to maybe which one you fall into, because that may help answer your question better. If you are already a meat eater, you probably will not have some massive advantage from taking it, because again, you've already got some stores in you. You're getting some stores from outside of you, but there again, it's relatively cheap, inexpensive, and safe to try if you wanted to throw it out there. But you've got most of the deck already stacked. So to think that you would see the same benefit from someone else, maybe not. In fact, we know that when it comes to creatine usage, maybe 50% of the average person are even responders, meaning, let's say we had a room full of 10 people, 5 of them tried it, 10 of them tried it. 5 of them may say, oh, yep, I noticed either a marginal or a high difference in my performance when I started taking the supplement. The other 5 people would be like, I'm pretty sure that you gave me the placebo because I didn't feel anything. So again, you already got the decks kind of stacked in your favor if you're a meat eater. So you have to decide whether or not, it's worth it to you to try it or not. Number 2, if you are not a meat eater, you may notice a pretty significant advantage, because even though it's naturally in some muscle cells, you're not getting it in your diet. So supplementation now provides you with something you're not getting, and it could show some improved performance. So there again, how do you know? You go buy it and you try it, right? And again, you even still may say, yeah, did that and still didn't notice a thing. I wouldn't say you're missing anything. I would just say that the benefit is either negligible or non-existent for you, but there is reason to believe that it's worth giving a shot if you are not a meat eater. Number 3, if you want bigger muscles. So yes, it will cause your muscles to fill up with water. So earlier I said if you're a meat eater, you may not notice an advantage. We're talking about performance advantage. But if you take extra creatine, it's naturally going to draw more water into the muscle. which will make the muscle look bigger, which may be of some value to you if you're going to spring break and looking for a future potential spouse or whatever. But we can't necessarily assume that that larger muscle is going to be of any value when it comes to improved performance in the mountain. So if you want to get a bigger muscle, sure. But is that going to translate into better, more meaningful performance on the mountain? We can't necessarily say that either. Short bursts of high intensity exercise. This is where it's like yes and no, but largely is going to depend on if you're one of the 50% or if you're among the 50% of responders. And it's also going to largely depend on whether or not you already eat meat. So creatine is a fuel source in an energy system that is very short lasting and is for sprint type of activity that, again, does not last very long. We see some improvement when people take creatine because it's the fuel source of that energy system, right? So again, relatively inexpensive to try. And if you find yourself doing lots of this type of training, which usually shows up either in sprinters and or CrossFit style workouts, sure, try it. Knock yourself out. See if you notice a significant improvement. But again, relatively inexpensive and safe to try. So if you wanted to try it, you certainly could. Going back to the entire hydration standpoint, is it dehydrating, etc.? So the common question is, like I said earlier with the example from the sheep hunt, if I stop taking this, will I lose a lot of those water stores? You could potentially lose them, but we've not seen where that has a dehydrating effect. And there's a difference between losing extra water stores and losing water stores to the point of it being dehydrating. And we don't see the latter. The latter would be important to point out if we did see that, because now you're talking about an issue that could produce some real problems when it comes to performance, whether it's in the gym or in a mountain or on a hike or a training hike or anything like that. So we don't see that. There are some reports, most of them anecdotal, that it increases the strain of a muscle and you potentially straining that muscle. So if you think about it, if you have a muscle that's full of water and then you push that muscle to, let's say, a limit or a threshold, the idea is that it's going to, let's say, tear or burst or rupture that muscle. That's probably aggressive terminology, but I think it paints the picture well. If you picture a water balloon that's full of water and you begin to squeeze the balloon, that balloon is eventually going to burst. If I give you the same balloon with no water in it or with significantly less water in it and you squeeze that balloon, it's just going to take the shape of your hand. It's going to almost, like you're going to have part of it pop out above your fist and part of it below your fist, but the middle is going to remain intact because there still is some flexibility in there. Same idea is true of a muscle. And again, we don't see that whenever people supplement with creatine. So should I avoid it or should I take it in the mountains? Part of this is going to be my own personal opinion based off of everything that I just mentioned in terms of what we see when it comes to the science, the chemistry piece of creatine. I personally do not think that the juice is worth the squeeze for me to now worry about buying, prepackaging, and hauling around one more supplement, one more powder that I've got to now figure out how to mix up and shake and take and bake and do all these things with, right? I don't think that there's enough reason to go through the hassle of that to take it on a hunt. With that said, it could potentially hydrate you more in an early season hunt or an early season backpacking trip or whatever. We do see that people are better able to regulate their temperature whenever they hold more water than if they were to be dehydrated. And we know that creatine can help do that. And we've seen where creatine has even been tested to use as that. And they did have better, what we call thermoregulatory. So they're better able to regulate their temperature in hot environments. Now, Was that better so much different that the group who didn't have creatine passed out because of dehydration, whereas the other one didn't and they thrived? No, we don't see that. But of the measurements that they used, they said, yeah, it looks like this could potentially be of some help. All of that said, I will say this too. If you have not spent and invested any time detailing down a nutrition strategy that gives you adequate calorie intake, enough carbohydrate in those calories, enough protein from those calories, enough fat from those calories, you know how much sodium you have in your electrolyte mixes, you're drinking regularly on the mountain. If you've not tackled those things, I would do those first. Those will yield, hands down, the best results before you ever skip those and take a supplement. No supplement, creatine or otherwise, is going to be able to perform better than a nutrition plan that is tailored for you. And we've developed innumerable resources that you can get your hands on, download, sometimes free or very inexpensive, to try to get an idea of what those numbers are. It does not get any easier now than to figure those numbers out. So that if you've not done that, I would do that before I ever bought a supplement. Number 2, or whatever number we're on here. Should I avoid or take it in preparation and training for the mountains? In other words, whenever I'm training for an ultra, I'm training for a hunt, or I'm training for a ski tour or whatever, should I take supplementation in my training even if I don't plan to take it on the mountains? And I think that all of this goes back to individualism. It's going to be dependent on you. Do you eat meat? Do you not eat meat? Do you have a detailed nutrition plan and you've mastered the basics? Are you doing any sprint type of work? Being able to go back and answer those questions is going to tell you whether or not it's worth trying. And even if you don't fall into any of those categories where it seems like it might be worth trying, it at least then would speak to why you didn't notice any effects whenever you went to try it too. So it's always going to come down to whether or not you feel like it's worth doing. But I think that you really have to evaluate, where do you fall in those groups that we looked at? What style of training are you doing? And then decide from there. So like, I'll give you an example. If you're doing a lot of endurance type of training where we've not seen any real value in taking creatine, it's hard for me to sit here and tell you, oh yeah, you should definitely throw this in the mix. If you're doing a lot of sprint work, or maybe you're in a block of training that happens to do a lot of sprint work, even if you are training for an endurance race, should you throw it in then? Maybe it's worth trying. According to the literature, you might see some benefit from it. So like everything with every supplement, there's a few things to keep in mind. And that is, supplementation is when you can't get something naturally from the diet, and or your needs are so high that you have to fill it from an outside source because you can't get it from food. You have to evaluate, what are the reported benefits? Are those actually true? And do I fall into the category that would say, yeah, you probably would notice a difference here? And then evaluate whether or not you want to try it or not. So hopefully that helps. I hope you guys enjoy these nutrition shorts as we start to do more and more of them. I've already got a couple on the docket that I think that we'll probably tease out over the next few months here. If you've got others you're interested in, you can send those in as well. But we will be back again with a normal episode here in another week or so. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you later.